Right, so today I'm joined by Graeme Matheson, who's Outsourcing Lead for John Lewis Partners. Delighted to have you with me today, Graeme. It must have been a tumultuous ride that you guys have been on. I wonder if you can give us a little bit of an overview of what's been going down for you at John Lewis.
Okay, Kerry, thanks very much for inviting me to join you today. It's a pleasure. Kerry, it has been an unprecedented and remarkably busy time for us in the last few months. I think it's been really interesting to see some of the changes that we've made internally and with our suppliers. And if we look back on this time, I think when we get to the end of this year or into next year, some of the technology changes that we've rushed through, that we've been talking about and talking around for months and years, but we found the ability to deploy them in a matter of days and weeks has been remarkable. And I think if we can continue to operate at that pace, it will make the partnership a better place, and hopefully make the customer experience that we deliver better than it already is.
Yeah, I've heard that quite a lot, that lots of new techs have been deployed just because it was necessitated. So
Yeah.
what technologies have you put into place?
So we've deployed a number of solutions around about working from home, and I think it's been really interesting for us that we've historically spoken about wanting to trial work from home, but we've self-created barriers to it around about concerns about partners becoming isolated, around about actually what will the experience be like for the customer at the end of that. So we've deployed a range of technologies through from providing laptops to partners and to advisors from our outsourced estate, through to physically lifting desktops out of sites. So we've tried to deploy the solution that works best for the advisor and for the partner, rather than trying to deploy a solution that works best and is easiest for us. We still have some challenges to work through. We still have some challenges in relation to how we route calls to advisors, and we're looking at trying to deploy technology that would allow us to use the advisor's home phone line in the same way you would use a phone line coming in and out of a contact centre, rather than connecting over mobile or over broadband. So more to come and more change to come on it. I think the one piece that's been at the heart of everything that we've done for this is what we've tried to do is to look at what's best for the partner and what's best for the advisor. So in terms of what work do we give them, how do we connect to them, and we've worked really hard to deploy technology that allows that partner and that advisor to be better connected to their manager. So it's not just about deploying the tools that they need to do their job, to do their customer experience job. It's overlaying on top of that some communication and some smart team communicator tools that allow that partner and that advisor to stay in contact with their circle of colleagues and with their manager, to make sure that that same dialogue that you would have in the office about, what did you have for your dinner last night? What do you think about what's on the TV? Did you see the football that's not now happening? To make sure that all of that dialogue continues to happen. And equally, we recognise that there's a huge amount of development takes place in the contact centre estate, just through advisors and managers overhearing conversations and listening into how their colleagues talk to other customers, how they handle challenging calls. So what we're trying to do just now is to understand how can we make those experiences start to come to life again.
I mean, obviously COVID has been a complete nightmare and a travesty and a tragedy, but it has driven some really, really positive change as well. So as you say, the acceleration of deployment of new techs, but a whole new wellness agenda. So so the employee wellbeing piece is really, really strong. Do you think that's going to continue?
Yeah, I think it's something that as an industry, I think we've all spoken about. And over my career, the number of visits I've done to contact centres, whether they be as part of RFP processes or just best practice, and everyone's always talked about how we try and make them great places to work. But I think if we're all very realistic about it, that's perhaps not been the top of our agenda when we get to our budgeting exercises at the end of the year. I think that when I look at the kind of almost the first conversation we had when we realised we were going into lockdown was, right, let's identify our partners and our advisors who are most vulnerable, who lives with somebody who's more vulnerable. How do we get them excuse me, how do we get them out of the contact centres as priority number one and get them home? Once we've got them home, let's work out a solution that allows that person to then work from home. But it was almost a case of saying to people, go home now, and we will work with you to develop a solution that will allow you to get back to work from home in a few days. So we did have a period of time where we were paying people to effectively just not be at work. We quite quickly got over that and quite quickly then deployed solutions to those people. But that dialogue has continued through everything that we're doing. So what we're now doing is we've now reopened our in-house contact centre estate, so that one in Hamilton and one in Didsbury. But realistically, we're able to cope with probably about a third of the headcount in those sites that we would normally see on a working day because of social distancing. We have a load of partners who are working at home who want to come to work. They want to be in the office, they want to re-engage with their colleagues, and they want to re-engage physically with their manager and their management population. But what we're trying to work through just now is actually, how do we do that? Because what we can't do is say, right, well, just everyone comes to work on a Monday, because we don't have the space for it. This has allowed us to start doing, particularly the working from home initiatives. They've allowed us to start looking at, actually, is there a more flexible approach that we can take with some of our staffing? So right now we're fairly regimented. We're open from 8 in the morning till 9 at night, 7 days a week. It's a bit old school. It's a bit kind of standard opening hours. Actually, is there an opportunity for us to be able to say to some of our partners or some of the advisors, look, if it works better for you, if actually your work-life balance would be better to work from 6 p.m. till midnight because you want to do childcare or whatever, fine, do that. We'll find you work that we can do. We've got lots of activity that's phone-based. We've got lots of activity that's not phone-based. Can we look to start to deploy that stuff? So we're trying to pull the positives. And actually, when I look at it, I think there's an opportunity that we may end up delivering a better and broader customer experience across a range of channels coming out of this that we probably ever even considered going into it with. When we looked at kind of our target operating model, it was remarkably traditional. Around about, we know our opening hours, we've got a couple of in-house estate offices, we've got our outsource estate, and we'll kind of split work in silo around about that. I think when we come out of this, we'll have a much more fluid and dynamic workforce who hopefully will feel more enabled and more empowered, and hopefully will actually be able to start to push work to them that works for them, rather than just because it happens to be in the vertical that they previously worked in.
Wow. So do you think you might be exploring different technologies, more use of chatbots, more use of automation, and what about the gig economy?
So I think that we absolutely will start to push more into some of those digital conversation channels. We already have a presence through web chat that's deployed through our website. We have a partnership with LivePerson that we use to deploy asynchronous or WhatsApp messaging to customers. It's fair to say that both of those are at a relatively small scale. We need to do more to drive bots into both of those channels because they're still largely administered by human beings. There's a whole bunch of traffic that goes through those channels. Realistically, we could push customers to either self-serve or you push to a bot and the customer gets a great experience that way. And that's not about us just trying to devalue some of that contact. We recognize that even contact that we handle through bots or robotization, we still have to deliver it in a good way and in a timely way. But we're keen that by the time that you get to a partner or you get to an advisor in an outsourced contact center, it's because we need to deal with your question. It's because we need to interact with you, not because we just don't have a route to deal with you through any other way, which is kind of where we're at just now for some of our contact channels. I think in terms of the gig economy, I think that home working absolutely allows us to look at more flexible staffing arrangements. I think what it also allows us to do is to break away from our current geographic set. So our current set, we have our Hamilton site, Didsbury that's near Manchester, Plymouth, Exeter, Stratford, and obviously our offshore site in Manila. I think what's becoming more exciting when we talk more about the scale of our home working opportunities actually if somebody's got a decent broadband connection, it shouldn't really matter where they are. You know, you could quite easily be sitting in your villa in the south of France with a decent broadband connection, handling John Lewis customer contact. And if I can find an advisor that's willing to do that, I'll go and visit them regularly to do their one-to-ones. Because it feels like, you know, we've got a real opportunity here to bring employment to areas that perhaps struggle to find regular employment, or it's more seasonal employment. And when you look at some of the seasonal employment in this country that's effectively disappeared as a result of COVID and hotel chains and tour operators going bust, there's maybe a real opportunity there for us to provide some opportunities for some of those people. And some of those opportunities to be more flexible for people in the hours that they work.
There will be a lot more available talent in the UK. Do you think that will force you to change your global footprint and your delivery destinations, or?
I don't think so. I think, you know, when I look at the work that we're doing in Manila, and the lockdown in Manila is an unusual example because it's been way more strict in a lot of ways than the lockdown here in the UK. Our offshore site is run by Sitel for us in metropolitan Manila. And we went from having nobody on site kind of overnight, and we're now running at about 80% of our headcount in Manila. And that 80% of the headcount is able to work because they've decided to self-isolate away from their families and live in hotels, literally right next to the office. And they've been doing that now for kind of 10 weeks or so, and will continue to do so until lockdown over there is ceased. You know, that to me exhibits a level of faith and confidence in the John Lewis brand and a dedication that I'm not sure we would get elsewhere. And if anything, it makes me less nervous about continuing work in the Philippines. I've always been an advocate of offshoring the appropriate work types. And my recent experience coming through COVID has made me an even stronger advocate of the right work sitting in the right location with the right supplier. And I think, you know, the key to that is to get the right supplier who shares our view of advisor well-being being absolutely key. I think had we had kind of your old school bad news outsourced contact center estate, that would perhaps be more challenging. But I'm glad to say that, you know, Sitel as a partner have absolutely been on board with us throughout this. And they are very quickly, when we spoke to them about the desire to push people out to work from home, they were already on it. They'd already started to develop a plan and develop a strategy to do it. So I think that, you know, does it mean that we won't explore other geographies? I think we will explore other geographies. We need to recognise that the reason we will probably explore other geographies, though, will be about economics and ability to serve, rather than because of a nervousness around about where we are.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I mean, that whole area is really of great interest to me, obviously, is how the service providers responded. And the research that we've got at the GSA shows that trust during this period has absolutely increased because partners have worked very collaboratively with their customers. So what's been your experience, and how have you split the workloads, and how has it all worked out?
So we already had a really strong relationship with Sitel. Sitel have been a partner to John Lewis now for nearly 10 years. We have a very good relationship with them. We expanded our relationship with them about 3.5 years ago, and then again 2 years ago expanded out into the Philippines. We have other suppliers. We work with a contact company based in Birkenhead. You know, equally, we have a very trusting and honest relationship with those guys, albeit we're early on in our journey with them. In terms of how did we split the work? Well, when we lost the Manila site, we very quickly recognised that we had some work that we had to share around across the estate. That was priority one for us. So we lost our branches, you know, almost overnight, which freed up a load of headcount in our in-house contact centres. And we were keen to keep those people busy. The last thing we wanted to do was to get to a place where we're paying partners to sit around and do nothing. So what we tried to do was to focus on the work that was delivering product to customers, delivering revenue into our estate, and make sure that that work was continuing to be done. We try to prioritise the right pieces of work. We did take some reasonably short-term tactical actions to effectively switch off some channels of work. So if in the early days of the coronavirus lockdown, if you'd tried to email us, there was nobody home. We just deliberately deprioritised that work channel for a few days to allow us to shuffle work around to the right people. We very quickly turned it back on, but there were a few days where we recognised that as a channel, we would be unable to deliver a great experience to those customers. So we drove those customers to call us because it's easier and quicker to handle a load of queries through that channel. What we did do, though, is maintain our non-voice channels in messaging to make sure that vulnerable customers who weren't able to phone us could still keep in touch with us.
Yeah. So obviously it has been a great deal of tolerance of people accepting a lower level of customer service because they understand. Do you think that will remain? And do you think, so I remember you saying in Belfast that you were juggling sort of like having to respond to handwritten letters as much as you were having to respond to social media. Do you think that, you know, your customer base has become more tech savvy as a result and will be?
I'd love to say the answer to that question is yes. We're still dealing with handwritten letters. We're still having customers sending us envelopes stuffed with cash in return for products. I think those customers will always continue to be, they will always continue to trade with John Lewis, and we will continue to serve them in the best way that we can. We have seen a massive influx in calls that I would call them how do I calls. So customers have purchased technology in order to either allow them to work from home or just keep themselves entertained at home. And they're now sitting at home with their kit trying to work out how the hell did they get it to work. So that volume of kind of preparation calls and connectivity and technical support calls, those volumes have gone through the roof. Now, that suggests to me that the John Lewis customer has more technology. I'm just not convinced that the John Lewis customer is any better at dealing with it than anybody else is in a situation where they suddenly end up with a new piece of kit at home. I'd like to think that could cut out a load of contact when a customer recognises that, you know, maybe their television won't talk to their fridge in a way that they thought perhaps those things would, but in a way that they perhaps will in the future with 5G. So I don't think our customers are necessarily any more technically savvy than they were. They have been remarkably understanding. And when I look at our voice of the customer, which is our customer satisfaction survey, when I look at the results of that survey, we've flatlined all the way through from the start of the year and have continued to achieve the very same levels that we were back then. So that demonstrates to me, I guess, you know, customers are grateful that we're still around. Interestingly, when Next had to pause trading, we saw a real influx in customer contact around about fashion. And that demonstrates, you know, and there was an element of that, I think, that the customers were just glad somebody was still around to sell stuff. Mm-hmm. And I think that there was a fear that actually, oh God, who else is going to have to stop trading? And clearly some things are essential to some people, so they came to us, which is great. So, you know, we've definitely seen a bit of a bow wave of customer gratitude. That will run out. Customers will default back to expecting us to be around, to deliver service to them in a swift manner, in a succinct manner, and to deliver first contact resolution to them in whatever way we can. And over the last couple of weeks, we've started to see a little bit of that creeping in to some of our post-sale and fault-finding electrical stuff, where customers are starting to say, you know, my kit has been away for repair for some time, perhaps. They're being less sympathetic about the fact that some of our repair and service network is struggling with the same absence and attendance and provision of productive hours that everyone is. But they're starting to become less sympathetic to that and become more demanding. And, you know, I think that's perfectly reasonable. I think customers can expect us to get back to normal as quickly as possible.
Yeah. Do you think the same analogy might apply to the enterprise customer with their service providers. So one of the conversations I've been having is everyone's been really, really flexible because they realise just how difficult a scenario we've all been in. But when we actually do start emerging and restarting strategies are well underway, there'll be a truing up, and that will be actually you didn't provide this as well as you could have done, or you didn't hit your KPIs, and therefore, what do you think?
I wouldn't be at all surprised if there was across some parts of industry in the UK. We've been really clear with our suppliers, within John Lewis to say, this has been a tough time for everyone, and it would be unreasonable of us to come to you and say, you failed your KPI, you failed your service level, give us a big fat check, or take a demerit point. I have no doubt whatsoever, though, that the relationship that we have with our suppliers will vary greatly from how some other businesses deal with some other suppliers. And you don't need to read a lot of business and industry press to see some really shocking examples of how some suppliers have been treated, where they've been effectively dumped with stock that customers told them they just didn't want. We've not done that. We're actively not doing that. We are fulfilling our contracts with our suppliers, and our procurement processes continue to rumble on. And certainly within the contact centre estate, we have absolutely no desire at all to go to a supplier and say, this is all your fault. It just doesn't feel like the right way to do things. And it comes back to it at the heart of it all. I think that industry works well when industry is about relationships. If you're managing to the contract, there's something broken. The contract should be a piece of paper that you pull out to re-sign when it expires. It shouldn't be kind of a document you're carrying around with you and referring to day in, day out. Certainly not in my industry. Anyway, I recognise that maybe that's different for others, but I've no doubt at all that there will be a reckoning at the end of this for some.
Yeah, no, I fear there will be too. So what's just to conclude, what do you think will be for you personally, in your professional capacity, and for JL, will be the permanent changes that take place as a result of COVID-19?
I think what I will see, or what I would like to think I will see, is a workforce who are even more engaged in delivering great experiences for John Lewis than they were before, when they start to recognise the fact that we are doing everything that we can to make this a safe and happy workplace, whether that safe and happy workplace be at home or in an office for them. I'd like to think that that will then enable us to deliver greater customer experiences. And I'd like to think we will start to become even more flexible in how we do that. I think that we will probably continue to see a huge tranche of our staffing from in-house and our outsource estate working from home. The permanent change hopefully will be that we end up with an even more engaged workforce across the estate. I think equally we will perhaps see a reduction in the amount of what was clearly unnecessary travel that was taking place. I think that I've spoken to a number of colleagues and peers who say it will be great not having to travel anymore. If I'm honest, I think that's unrealistic because undoubtedly some conversations are just better done face to face. I think that the false environment of video calls are great, but I think we will all end up having to travel some, but it would be great to think that we're all traveling a little bit less and perhaps messing up the environment a little bit less than we've all been guilty of in the past. Yeah,
too true. And what about you? Are you happy working from home?
I'm happy working from home sometimes. I think it's fair to say. My wife is working from home as well, and we've got 2 young kids, and it's remarkably challenging. And if anyone comes out at the end of this deserving a pay rise, I think it's both nurses and school teachers for putting up with the kids all the time. But yeah, it's great to be at home more than historically I have been.
Yeah. Okay, so there are some positives from this awful situation. And you'll be very pleased to hear, I just cycled past John Lewis and it's got the biggest queue possible going around the building in Kingston. So everyone's desperate to get into their, I think you've got the 70% clearance on or something, haven't you? So.
Yeah, we do. Trading's gone really well. The challenge that we face, Kerry, is that trading's always really good in clearance, in that we move a lot of stock out the door, but it's clearance, so we're making no money out of it. And the other challenge we've got is that we create almost a false bubble of demand. And what we're trying to understand is what's the future of demand for our stores going to look like once we get over clearance and we start to tail down towards kind of our next peak trading period, which will be the Black Friday. We don't know what we're going to need in terms of store and store staff. So what we don't want to do is to reopen stores to then have to close them again because the demand's just not there. Evidence from around the world suggests that whilst people are going back out to shops, they're not going to shopping centres unless there's a real reason to go to them. So they're going to smaller, more local stores and grocery stores, but they're not returning in numbers to shopping centres. That's pretty much where we are.
Yeah.
So we're having to look very carefully at actually what does our future store estate look like? Does it need to be as big as it is when we went into the COVID lockdown? And actually, do we need to be more aligned between the John Lewis and the Waitrose brands? So we'd already announced that we were going to reduce some of our floor space in one of our stores. If I'm honest, it feels like we will be reducing floor space in other stores. And Sharon White, our chairman, has talked reasonably open about actually potentially maybe not reopening all of the stores. Some of them may not reopen. Right now, we don't have any idea of the size or the scale or the likelihood of any of that. It will largely depend on how quickly can we safely open the stores, because the stores that we're reopening, we're opening those that are simplest and safest to get to. And simplest and safest to maintain social distancing in. That's not particularly easy in some of our other shops, so they will be the last shops to reopen. And we also need to just get some clear direction from, well, the English government and the Scottish government around about, is it 1 metre, is it 2 metres, or is it no metres? And it's just, the confusion just doesn't help, if I'm honest.
Yeah. So looking at some of the stores that I went into yesterday, as soon as it opened, it was just like, right, I can go shopping, fabulous. I think loads of short stores have opened that really, really do not comply whatsoever. And I think probably John Lewis is taking it very, very seriously and making sure that you go above and beyond the basic requirements, whereas I don't think many really are. So
I think you're absolutely right. Yeah, it's interesting that even during lockdown in Scotland, I visited my local Waitrose and they were being very religious about how many people they let in, how many people they didn't let in, a one-way system. And that was from relatively early on in lockdown. And equally, I get the impression that a lot of people don't give a toss anymore.
No, they don't. They don't. It's almost like it's over. It really feels there's a vibe of it's all over now. So yeah.
I've got a friend who's a manager in the NHS, and he describes this as a Darwinian moment. The people who choose to ignore it and choose to put themselves at risk will be the ones that don't come out at the end of this. And those people that do choose to observe social distancing will be the ones that can continue to rock around, which is a fairly brutal way of putting it, but it's remarkably true. And I don't think people conceive of just how risky this is.
Yeah, because India's gone back into lockdown, hasn't it? So so they've got a second spike that's hit. I think is it Chennai? Yeah, Chennai.
It's gone back in. China has gone back. I think one of the Chinese cities has gone back into lockdown, and it undoubtedly is just through. And I get there's a desire to get the country back up and running, and there's a desire to get people back out and working. But this is where the partnership has been. We've been absolutely religious from day one in saying this is about partner safety and advisor safety and customer safety. And we will do nothing until we're reassured that those things are in place. Now, you could sit back and say, well, that's easy to do for a business the size of John Lewis because we've got big fat bank balance. We categorically don't. You know, we're losing millions and millions of pounds through this that we categorically can't afford to lose. But it's the right thing to do. But do you know what? If you're a small and struggling retailer, you would take the risk. Of course you would.
That also, yeah, it's survival, isn't it? So, how much did you manage to sell online?
It will just be interesting to see, I think, how long that bubble stays.
Yeah.
What we're seeing right now, we feel like what we're seeing is you've got a lot of people who have a disposable income, who their jobs aren't at risk, they're not particularly concerned about the future, who have a pile of cash that they have stashed away to pay for a summer holiday. They've now resigned themselves to thinking, well, I'm not going to get a summer holiday, so I'll just buy myself a massive television or a new sofa or whatever else. And thankfully enough, a bunch of that trade is coming to us.
Right.
That money will run out eventually, and a load of those people will start to think, well, actually, do you know what? The economy is starting to take a downturn, and they will stop buying that stuff. So we can't sit back and rest on our laurels and go, well, it's fine. Everyone's just going to spend their holiday money in John Lewis, because they're not. So, you know, usually by now, halfway through kind of June, usually by now, my plans for peak and Black Friday are fairly well bolted down in terms of resource requirements and how I will look coming through the end of the year. I've had to turn around to my suppliers and say, actually, I'm probably not going to have those numbers bolted down until August, which then means when I need to recruit and train those people, it compresses my window by 8 or 9 weeks.
Wow.
And the problem is, in our estate, we find it takes 13 weeks for an advisor to come through the front door and then become fully effective. So it takes a quarter to get that person in, trained, and fully effective. I kind of like my people to be in prior to the start of November, so they've got a bit of time being experienced before we then pound them with volume, which means that, again, that window of opportunity to get people in, it's so tight. If we want to run into peak this year, properly staffed and properly resourced to deal with the demand, but it's just the way of the world, because right now we genuinely don't know what demand is going to look like come the tail end of the year.
Yeah.
It's either going to fall off the face of a cliff because of economic uncertainty, and because Brexit will undoubtedly start to make headlines again. Scottish independence will undoubtedly start to make headlines again, unfortunately. Or we will just carry on and people will just continue to spend because they're grateful to have survived coronavirus.
Well, yeah, there is that point, isn't it? Life's too short. I think there's been a bit of reality check there for sure. So yeah.
So we'll see if it comes. Suck it and see. It's kind of my standard line for right now.
So Graeme, thank you so much for joining me, and stay safe and stay sane. Okay.
Thank you very much, Denise.